Our next presentation is our keynote address, A Look at Monitoring in 2021, presented by Ben Mackel of the US EPA Region 9.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Mackel. I am an Assistant Director of the Air and Radiation Division in US EPA Region 9, and we cover the Pacific Southwest corner of the country. And I'm here to talk to you all today about monitoring in 2021. So we're going to take a look today at air quality trends, particularly in California over these past 20 or 30 years. And then talk a little bit about the importance of high quality monitoring data, and then hone in a bit on some of the data quality issues we run up against that maybe the most, but then really take a step back and look at today's unique challenges. There are so many new things that you are encountering that makes your job that much more difficult than it had been even 2 years ago. And it's kind of nice to take that step back and just look at it all together, because it is really quite a new burden, and it's nice to acknowledge all that you're doing in today's environment. All right, it does feel a little odd, I have to tell you, to be remote and not live. This is pre-recorded, so that's kind of new to me. So normally you're all together in a room and you can talk about whatever is relevant and current. So can't do that through a recording. But if I could, we talk about the weather. So you'll have to do that for yourself based on wherever you are on the day that you're watching this. But also because we're in California, the next topic would sure probably be that smoke. And so I have a smoke response for you too, where you can add, is it really thick today? Is it getting worse? Is it better than it was an hour ago? Is it finally clearing up? And yes, generally we're now in October, so in most of the state right now, it is better than it has been, not in all of the state. But I bring this up just to recognize that smoke and air quality has become part of the daily conversation for everyone. You're going out on a bike ride, you're doing something with your family. You need to know that the air quality is safe where you are, it's safe where you're going, and it is going to be safe an hour from now or 2 hours from now. So you need to know the trend. That is a lot of burden on you as the monitoring folks, and it brings together just new challenges in working with a lot of other data that's out there, making sure that it's accurate spatially, and being able to present it to the public in a very quick fashion so that it's available for them when they need to make decisions. So just to acknowledge that is a huge burden on you all, but the service you're providing is so critically needed. Okay, so let's look a little bit at the air quality trends. And I can see that my picture is blocking the link to the report that this came from. But the figure on the left shows national, and this is average level air quality trends from 1990 to 2020, and it's written as a percentage above or below a given NAAQS. And you can see concentrations of air pollutants, all of them have dropped fairly significantly since 1990. And just as an example of some, carbon monoxide's down 73%, lead, this is from 2010, so it's that red color, down 86%, ozone 8-hour down 25%, PM2.5 annual from 2000 down 41%, and sulfur dioxide down 91%. So that's the dark blue line that you see. So very significant drops. And then the figure on the right shows a map of the PM2.5 24-hour concentrations at monitoring sites across the country. This is all in the year 2020. And you can really see the likely impacts of wildfire on concentrations in the western US. And that dark reddish color means it's above the 24-hour NAAQS. Okay, now let's take a look at that same type of data, but at the California state level. And again, the figure on the left shows those average air quality trends for the criteria pollutants. I'm going back as early as 1990, but to 2020. And you can see California's made significant progress in many areas over the last 20 years, particularly for NO2, SO2, carbon monoxide, and lead. But also for ozone, PM2.5 and PM10, but then you can really clearly see that there are challenges remaining, and the recent wildfire impacts have really played a role in trends for these pollutants, a lot bouncier, I would say, than what you saw in those national charts. And then the figure on the right shows PM 2.5 24-hour concentrations at the monitoring sites within California. And these are the ones that had complete data records for that overall trend period. And again, the darker red shows that it's above the 24-hour max. Okay, now here are some trend charts for NO2, carbon monoxide, and lead, still within the state of California, but broken down further by air district, and it represents a site level average of concentrations for each applicable air district that has a complete set of data across the overall trend period. So this doesn't encapsulate all the site data across California, but does give a sense of overall trends. And basically what you're seeing, hopefully you can see this. I know the font is small, but I guess I'm counting on the hope that you're doing this from a computer where you're close enough where you can read the small font. But you can see an overall downward trend of each of these pollutants. So that is definitely good news. Now this chart is showing the trends for ozone and includes site level averages of concentration for each air district in California that has complete site data across the entire trend period. And then as with the earlier charts, this figure does not encapsulate all site data across the state, but does give a sense of overall trends. And you can see that overall ozone concentrations have steadily decreased over the past 30 years for most areas, but we are seeing small increases in concentrations in recent years, and that's most likely influenced by recent wildfire activity. Okay, now here is a look at PM10 data, and you can see overall that PM10 concentrations have varied quite a bit over the past 30 years. And you can see an increase in concentrations in the most recent years, and again, that's likely mostly influenced by the recent wildfire activity. Okay, now here is a look at PM 2.5 trends with annual data on the left and then 24-hour on the right. And we're definitely seeing some different things here. With annual, there's a general decline in concentrations over the trend period, and this is a 20-year period, but with increased concentrations in those recent years, and that's most likely influenced by recent wildfire activity. And then it's more varied with the 24-hour concentrations throughout the years, but you're seeing that increase in recent years, again, likely due to recent wildfires. So we thought we would include a few maps of the non-attainment areas, just to show what you may already know, and why we spend so much time talking about air quality in California. I mean, there's a couple of sort of opposing things to draw from this chart. One is that yes, California is facing a huge burden from air quality challenges, and you know that the majority of those non-attainment areas, including all of the extreme, they're in California. But the other way to look at this is it is not just a California problem. There are non-attainment areas across the country, and that's useful to be thinking about, especially for EPA as we look at where nationally rules need to be tightened, standards need to be tightened. It's important to recognize that there are needs for this across the country. And now this slide is taking a look at PM 2.5, and this is a map of the annual standard. And I think the one clear conclusion to draw from this is there are a lot of the national air quality challenges are within the state of California. There are a couple of other non-attainment areas, but I think what really draws your eyes is how much of the state of California has areas where PM 2.5 is still a very significant concern. I would say the other thing to think about, though, is as we consider having more stringent standards, it is very likely possible that other areas of the country would also face challenges. So while it looks like the bulk of the attention would be on California right now, it is probably important for the rest of the country to be thinking about PM 2.5, especially as standards may get more stringent. Now, just to give a little sense of what it's like within EPA, when we're talking with folks across the agency or just at a more national level about some of the particular challenges that we face here in the Pacific Southwest, this is a helpful way to convey, how much of a burden that we all face out here. And so this is it shows by state the population that is living in non-attainment areas, and I can kind of matches what you see in those other charts, but California has by far more people living in non-attainment areas than any other state. So I don't know if this helps us get more resources, but this is definitely a slide that we draw from to try to help people understand how big of an issue this is, how many people are impacted by poor air quality. So just to know how we try to use the data that's in front of us. Okay, so now we've talked about some of those trends and have looked at the maps, but now let's focus in a bit on what is the need and importance of high quality monitoring data. And in this particular slide, we're talking about the regulatory decisions that we need to make. And it really starts at the very beginning. I mean, you have to have good, high quality monitoring data to go along with any health studies that we're going to be using to develop new national ambient air quality standards, the NAAQS. If we have the health data, I mean, we have to have the corresponding understanding of what's happening with ambient air quality levels to know what what level is causing those particular health outcomes. And then from there, non-attainment designations, just determining where and by how much air quality needs to improve. And on the other end of that, making attainment designations, being able to look at the air quality trends and determining, when the NAAQS are being met. So, I mean, without the availability of higher quality data, we really lose the ability to inform those health studies, to assess risk exposure for our communities, and it just gets much more difficult to adequately determine attainment. And then from that, the degree of controls and permitting requirements that are needed for that particular area. Okay, so maybe this is a good time to pause for a second and just kind of hone in on what are those more common data quality issues that we run up against and network challenges that can both impact the quality of the data that you produce, but also affect the usability of that data. So at the network level, you see listed here, monitor and site downtime, significant data loss and gaps, and lack of adequate staffing and resources to keep that network going. So EPA has a regulatory oversight responsibility to audit monitoring agencies every 3 years in what are called technical system audits, or TSAs as they're written here. And this slide highlights the areas where we commonly observe issues that may affect the quality of the data you produce. And you'll see, the common TSA findings on the quality assurance, independence and up-to-date and complete documentation, training plans. You'll see that in a few different ways. And we'll also give recommendations for areas of improvement to strengthen the monitoring programs. And you see some of the more common ones down there. I will use this as a time to give a shameless plug to Bilal's presentation tomorrow if you're watching this live, and you can't see the time on here, but it's 11:40 to 12 p.m. and just common TSA observations. So I would encourage folks to listen to that and have a chance to talk with Bilal about some of the things that we more commonly observe as we do these audits. And I will also say, it's an audit, so people don't always enjoy them, but they are really meant to just help strengthen the program. It's really been, I've been a part of some of them now, the openings and closeouts, and the conversations seem really helpful to all sides. They are definitely meant to help improve the organization and a chance to highlight issues that you've come across, and just try to get attention to issues that may have been there for a long time. So they are definitely meant to be a positive experience, and I think more and more people are finding them to be very helpful and serving their interests. So a plug for that, and a plug for Bilal's conversation tomorrow. So I mentioned earlier that high quality data is very necessary for regulatory purposes, but it really goes beyond that. It's also crucial just generally for public awareness. We're all using monitoring data in a multitude of ways to keep the public informed about their air quality and the potential public health risk exposure they're facing. One way we communicate that data at EPA is through our Air Now program, which you're probably all aware of. The Air Now site highlights air quality in a local area, but while still providing air quality information at a state, national, and at a world level as well. It uses the U.S. Air Quality Index, which is the color-coded way to help simply communicate whether air quality is healthy or unhealthy for you. And the public can use this information to make decisions to protect their own health at that moment. We also have the Air Quality Flag Program, where folks use colored flags that correspond to that particular AQI color. So schools, community centers, libraries, parks, fire stations, a number of folks are using these flags and raising them each day based on forecasted air quality. And this visual indicator of air quality alerts community members about changing air quality conditions so they can take actions to reduce their exposure. And coincidentally, the annual Air Quality Flag Program Fall Challenge is happening right now, so September 27th through November 5th. And if your organization is interested in helping communities get safer by displaying air quality flags, please apply by October 29th, and you will receive a free set of air quality flags from EPA Region 9 to use as part of your the air quality flag program. So something to think about. So we've all been increasingly challenged with communicating air quality data more effectively to the public during air quality pollution events. And today, air sensor networks are increasingly being used by the public and by the media when reporting on wildfire smoke impacts, as an example. And this is just a smattering of the media articles that came out during the 2020 wildfire season. And it really highlights the public's confusion about where to turn for high quality, accurate air monitoring data during wildfire events. So when you take a step back, it's really amazing to look at all the increased yet intersecting demands on monitoring programs and all of your time. I've talked a bit about wildfires, but maybe more broadly than that, there's an increased public demand for accessing and understanding real-time, very hyper-local air quality data. At the same time, the public is taking a much more active role in monitoring themselves via sensor networks. But then your regulatory monitors are critical for validating the accuracy of their data. And at the same time, there's an interest in understanding air toxics and converting monitoring data into public health risk exposure. Add to that the heightened interest in looking at community scale impacts. And, that's particularly those communities with environmental justice concerns. So at the state level, there's AB 617 with a monitoring focus, which I'm sure you all know about. And additionally, very active community engagement, which is leading to very focused emission reduction projects. And at the federal level, we have the American Rescue Plan, which will be bringing resources to monitoring agencies such as yours, but also directly to communities as well to better understand local conditions. And I'd also put in this bucket the near roadway monitoring, which of course is also uncovering near program areas. And then, oh, by the way, there's COVID-19, which of course has produced monster challenges for you to be able to continue your monitoring work and transmitting that data where it needed to go. So, and oh, by the way, you already had a day job with regulatory monitoring, and all the things I've talked about are fairly increased levels of effort in these past few years. So just taking a step back, I mean, there's just a huge increased need for a greater variety of high quality data But at the same time, there are these additional challenges and public attention have led to more innovation in this area. So some of those monitoring innovations that many of you have been a part of include the broad transition from filter-based PM monitors to more of a continuous monitors, and just generally more increased automation. I know COVID has pushed many of you to use automation, but also just the capacity for more remote operations. At the same time, there's been, as we talked about a little bit earlier, but the expansion and mixing of those non-regulatory sensor monitors with your regulatory monitoring data. So requiring more data interpretation, but leading to things like the Air Now Smoke and Fire Map. And just generally improve public communication on wildfires, sensors, there's smoke blogs, there's the air resource advisory forecasts, just much better tools now available to meet the very increasing demands by the public for high quality, very local, very real-time data. So to conclude, I just want to reiterate that access to high quality data is critical for many reasons, for regulatory decision making, for public awareness, and for better understanding health risk exposure. And I would say more than ever, the work that you're doing every day is the backbone and foundation of critical environmental and public health efforts. And that's at the national level and the state and local level as well. There have been so many challenges thrown at you all, and you've been doing an incredible job adjusting to those changing needs. So I just want to thank you all for the work that you do, and just congratulate you on getting so much done, especially in these last years as the challenges have increased so much. So thank you. And so here's my contact information, and if all goes well, I'll now be able to talk with you live. So let's see how that goes.
Thank you, Ben. We're now going to enter the live Q&A discussion for this session. We do have a few comments and questions listed in the chat. The first one is, do you have any recommendations for training resources?
Yeah, well, that might have been in relation to the comment on the types of comments we give during our TSAs. But maybe, I mean, the CAR PQAO training slides, and then we have EPA conference data, and then APTI, I'm blanking on what that stands for, but we have the Training Institute with a bunch of slides available. So maybe that could be helpful. Yeah, the Training Institute. So they're kind of all over the place, but I think that would be my response.
All right, we also had a comment in regards to the maps that you showed that highlighted how much better the northeastern seaboard was doing compared to California. And they were curious if that's related to wildfires or if there is potentially some other reason.
Yeah, and I see Dina tried to give a response to that, and definitely the wildfires, but also, you know, it's a different topography out here. The same reason that we have the air quality challenges. Some of it is because of the amount of emissions, and the other is because those emissions get trapped. And but so that, plus the fact that there's been all the wildfires in the recent years, certainly seems to be something that would make California very different than in the Northeast.
Indeed. Do you also find that if California's neighbors to the north and the south of the US have similar challenges?
Well, I mean, certainly with fires, we're seeing problems across the West. I guess the uniqueness here would be how much more challenging it is for that pollution to dissipate when it's trapped. I mean, when you have good winds, that definitely plays a role, but it's more like with ozone, I mean, looking more at ozone where, you know, the photochemical effects are, it takes time once you have the NOx, once you have the contributors to ozone formation, you know, you put that in a bowl surrounded by mountains, you're going to have time for it to form ozone more than it would be able to in other parts of the country where it would dissipate faster. So certainly the rest of the West is feeling the impacts of smoke. From then, it's a matter of how long it'll stay in the territory.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any additional questions for Ben? Feel free to type it into the Q&A chat.
And I do see that Dina put in the Idalia Paris's address if you want to get those flags that we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great program, you know. It's a good way to educate folks on air quality, but just to have them have a greater appreciation for what their air quality is at that moment in time, and when they should be concerned. So it's a good way to reach people that just definitely need to know more about their local current air quality.
Mm-hmm. And so the increase in ozone in 2020 was due to fires in California as well, or?
Is this what Dina's responding to? I see Dina responding to California and Mexico, or Canada and Mexico. I mean, partially, I want to say yes. Others may want to chime in as well. I mean, there were, you know, ozone's complicated. It's VOC levels and NOx levels, you know, intertwining to have an impact. But I do believe that fire was a part of that. Mm-hmm. And temperature, of course.
Of course. Does anyone have any additional questions for Ben? I know you had mentioned, this is a question for me. I know you had mentioned that some standards might be analyzed and potentially lowered in the near future. How do you think that might impact California and California's monitoring workload?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, it certainly impacts the planning workload, but on the monitoring side, let's say we're looking at particulate matter right now, and if we tighten the standards and areas are already in non-attainment, I mean, there's certainly a need for planning because now there's a more rigorous target to meet. So I don't know that impacts you on the monitoring side. You still need to monitor. You were already doing that, I guess, but it definitely makes more challenges in trying to meet more difficult targets where you can see from those maps, it's already been a challenge today. So I would say your planning folks will feel that burden. Monitoring folks, you're already feeling that burden.
All right, well, thank you for being with us here today, Ben. We're going to go ahead and close out the session and move on to the next session. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.